We finally got our hands on Wayward Son.
Yes, hello my babies, hello my darlings, hello my ragtime gals. I have missed Simon and Baz in their uncomfortable nosebleed-inducing cuteness for far too long.
We absolutely loved the first book, Carry On, so much, and we read it back in 2015 and never thought that we were going to get anything more than that. So when Rainbow Rowell announced that she was writing a sequel, we about near lost our minds.
The story ended so nicely in Carry On, where most of the loose ends were tied up and there was hope for Simon and Baz. The story was very character-driven and the character arcs were a thing of beauty, planned and written to perfection.
So Wayward Son scared me a little bit. Every beat of the characters in the last book was working to a conclusion, and the plot seemed to work itself around the character arcs. What was going to happen when Rainbow Rowell stepped out of her original box and stepped into unknown territory?
It could have been a train wreck, and nothing would have been more disappointing than to have the Carry On series ruined.
So it was with slight hesitation that we dove into Wayward Son, and believe me, there are a few books that we actually clear our to-be-read pile for.
Simon, Baz, and Penny are finding life outside of Watford strange. Baz and Penny are doing okay, attending classes and settling into their newfound independence. But Simon is not doing so well.
At the end of Carry On, he accidentally killed his father figure, and unbeknownst to him, his actual father. He lost a close friend, he gave himself wings and a tail, and most importantly, he went from being the most powerful wizard in the world to being a normal.
The reality of everything that happened to him over the past year begins to creep up on him slowly, and before he knows it, his inability to process his trauma affects his entire life.
By the time Wayward Son opens, Simon can barely get off the couch, and he and Baz aren't doing very well. Simon is depressed, and it's leaving him a mess. Penny and Baz don't know what to do or how to get him to take an interest in anything.
That's when Penny gets a brilliant idea on how to pull Simon out of his funk. Did someone say road trip?
The three hop on a plane and land in Chicago in order to hook up with Penny's boyfriend Micah. Penny and Micah have been together for years, ever since Micah came on an exchange program to Watford. But when she shows up at his door, she finds out that Micah has moved on.
Penny was sure that they were going to get married one day, but it turns out she had been missing a bunch of signals from Micah that he wanted to break up. To be honest, I think he went about it a cowardly way and never actually said, "Hey Penny, guess what? I want to break up." He just hinted at it, and when she didn't take the hint, he gave up.
Devastated and feeling unsure of herself, the group moves on. They still have their road trip across America, which apparently they're shocked to find is actually a 3-day drive. But North America isn't just bigger, it has its own rules that apparently no one has ever talked to them about. The three quickly get into trouble, slay some vampires at a Ren fair, and then they get chased by an overeager fan into the Quiet Zone.
And it's such a cool idea. Since the magic system works only with the help of normals whose use of colloquial phrases creates new spells, our characters realize that there are spaces in America where spells just don't work.
Because unlike Europe, where there are people just tripping over each other, America can have tons of space in between people, and that means magic can't get a toehold. And these quiet zones belong, by treaty, to magical creatures.
And an overeager guy named Shepherd, interested in talking to the mages, chases them into one of these quiet zones, where they're attacked by the magical creatures. But Shepherd wants to be their friend and won't take no for an answer. He's been making friends with magical creatures all over the place, and mages are next on his list.
With Shepherd's help, whether they were willing to take it or not, the group road trips across America to save Agatha from a Silicon Valley cult.
You heard us right. A Silicon Valley cult. It has to be my favorite thing about this book. I mean, how perfect is that?
And they want to continue to level up by figuring out how to acquire mage powers.
The Simon we left at the end of Carry On has had a chance to absorb the damage that had been done to him his entire life by the mage. He has to adjust from being the most powerful mage in the world to a normal with a wing and tail condition.
Simon's PTSD feels real, and it affects every area of his life, including his relationship with Baz. He's desperate for some control in his life, but he doesn't know how to express himself about anything, and he can't tell Baz how he feels.
And Baz is in love with Simon, but he can't understand why Simon just keeps pushing him away. But until he hears Simon tell him to go, he's not going to leave. So the two are steeped in misery even though they love each other and are still technically together.
Aw, did you want a happy little Simon Baz romance?
Yes, and I didn't get it. Instead, I got these two adorable, wonderful characters torturing themselves in a romance that should have been giving me butterflies, god damn it.
But it makes sense.
But I want butterflies!
I mean, mostly it sucks that they didn't really work out any of their differences in this book. They acknowledged that there is a problem, but they didn't make any steps towards fixing it. Another problem with this book is it felt like Wayward Son retconned a few things. Like, it seems impossible that the kids would not know how different America is from Britain in terms of magical rules.
Penny has a superiority complex when it comes to magic, the British education system, and a general sense of curiosity. She has also been dating an American for several years, including the time when Micah visited Watford on an exchange program. In all that time, how did she and Micah never have a single conversation about how magic is different in their two countries?
Penny has been to America with her father, who is a scholar in magic. How could they have not had a single conversation about the difference between magic and magical society in Britain and America?
It felt weak and out of place for our crew to be so blindsided by the country, and unfortunately most of the plot hinges on the fact that Penny, Baz, and Simon don't know what the rules are of the States.
Luckily, the group is saved by Shepherd, who's like a cute, eager puppy who just wants to learn everything he can about magic. Granted, he did make a terrible first impression,
But after the third time he saves their ass, you'd think they'd stop giving him a hard time and just trust him.
they got into so much trouble for not knowing what's going on, and there's a guy right there, eager to tell them everything they want to know, and they refuse to use him as a resource, and it was just a little frustrating.
Carry On was a level of perfection that you don't come across in most books. Wayward Son was a bit of a step down, not because it was bad, but because it was nearly impossible to live up to the first book.
But there is still enough magic from Carry On to carry the story through. See what I did there? I'm so clever, I love it. Part of the problem was that Carry On was so character-driven. Half the book revolved around Simon thinking about Baz, or vice versa. The relationship was the center of the novel, and the plot was secondary.
Wayward Son reverses it, and the plot becomes the center, and Simon and Baz revolve around it. The story still works, but it doesn't quite deliver on what we were showing up for.
On top of that, the book ends almost abruptly without much being resolved except for the A-plot.
But despite our critiques, we definitely enjoyed Wayward Son. While it wasn't a perfect deep dive into Simon-Baz romance, it did keep our interest, and you learn a lot more about the American Mage Society, a crazy Silicon Valley cult, and Vampire Society.
And one more book in the trilogy is coming called Anyway the Wind Blows.
Anyway the wind blows.
And we are definitely going to get some resolutions in the third book. Wayward Son just kind of suffers from middle book syndrome.
But we got enough of what we love in Wayward Son to keep us coming back for more. So here's praying for those butterflies in the last one. Dear God.